The Kansas Natural Resources Conservation Service, known as NRCS, is excited to share information about a new initiative called the Great Plains Grassland Initiative, or GPGI. I'm Doug Spencer, State Grazing Specialist, and want to spend a moment to share some highlights. As shown on the slide, an overarching theme of the initiative is to defend and grow grassland cores. For those unfamiliar with NRCS, our vision states a world of clean and abundant water, healthy soils, resilient landscapes, and thriving agricultural communities through voluntary conservation. Kansas NRCS sees our native grasslands as essential in our agency vision being a reality. Defending and growing large, intact grassland cores is a vision to combat the loss of valuable rangeland to woody plant encroachment. When considering the photos shown, the photo on the right is a reality of a fragmented, vulnerable, high-maintenance grassland remnant. The photo on the left is a reality of intact, guarded, low-maintenance grassland landscapes. The Great Plains Grassland Initiative is using a rancher-driven, science-informed, and agency-supported framework to make this vision of large, intact cores a reality on the Kansas landscape. If you envision your ranch being a valuable component of a larger landscape core, continue watching for details. As mentioned, the rancher-driven aspect of this initiative is the key component. Ranchers shared their vision for landscape cores as science was presented. Challenges as well as opportunities were discussed, and as an agency, we listened. Rancher input continues to be a valuable component as each step in the initiative is taken. Science is informing the initiative via online tools and key work by science professionals. A lot of science identifies woody plant encroachment and its negative effects to rangeland landscapes. Only recently has there been a tool with the ability to identify the progression of woody plants through time and space at large scales. This tool is known as the Rangeland Analysis Platform and shows the progression of woody plants both spatially and temporally. The best part of this platform is its availability to ranchers and the public. While science supports the need to control woody plants on rangeland landscapes, Dr. Dirac Twidwell identifies how past approaches have missed the mark if halting woody plant encroachment is the goal. Through presentations and now a guide, Dr. Twidwell presents a winning strategy to halt woody plant encroachment by defending and growing grassland cores. These Kansas maps show a layer that is available in the Rangeland Analysis Platform covering a span of 30 years and shows the loss of tree-free grassland, or tree-free being shown in the green. The grassland cores of 1990 are appearing more and more as remnants due to woody plant encroachment. This is obviously concerning and highlights the need for an improved strategy. At the same time, we need to understand what's happening at a local level to see why defending and growing cores can lead to success. I wanted to quickly show an example of a local view within the Rangeland Analysis Platform. As you can see, the green so-called tree-free areas can still have trees present, but at lower cover levels. It's these areas that need attention so that a core is secured and defensible. Knowing trees encroach from existing trees through seed sources, the view on the right identifies areas in the landscape with greatest potential to transition to woody plant dominance. Another great resource is historical aerial images. These historical images, along with historical accounts, identify the tree-free reality of grasslands from just a few decades ago. The spread of woody plants on the landscape is clearly seen in recent images and identifies the need for action to create defensible cores. If you take the time to look up the regions of Kansas grassland online, you may get a misguided view based on the photos that show up. Unfortunately, a view of intact, guarded, low-maintenance rangeland occurs on only a few of the many images that show up. Culturally, we've accepted this view of vulnerable rangelands as scenic. The viewer may not even realize just how vulnerable to increased woody plant encroachment these landscapes truly are. Traditional views of managing woody plants may have led to increased vulnerability on the landscape. The idea that woody plants are compatible with livestock production and can be managed at tolerable levels needs further discussion. As noted on the slide, large-scale monitoring indicates that if our management involves these recommendations, our tolerable levels might be set too high, or we need to better understand spatial context when implementing these recommendations. As an agency incorporating past guidance, we missed the vulnerability our rangelands had to woody plant encroachment. We would often drive right past the tree highlighted with the red arrow and target the trees over the hill. The denser stand met the criteria for beyond tolerable as it was having a larger negative impact on forage production. But what did we miss by driving past this highlighted tree? Well, if we take a closer look, we begin to realize this is an Osage orange tree or a brush species. Not only that, but this specific tree is producing hedge apples or hedge balls, as you can see in the branch in the photo. What we missed with past considerations is the fact that this tolerable tree is providing 200 to 300 seeds per hedge apple, and this branch alone is providing around 7,500 tree seeds into a grassland landscape annually. If we take another location, but this time the species is eastern red cedar, how can this one tree impact the surrounding landscape? Well, if this tree is a seed producer, it will be producing over 1.5 million seeds that can be exposed to the surrounding grassland landscape annually. That seed exposure on the landscape is the key reason we need to start asking questions like, what's the risk at my grassland site? And is it vulnerable to woody plant encroachment? I previously mentioned a science guide, and within that preprint guide is a vulnerability framework. Understanding woody plant encroachment within this framework is key to lowering risk and vulnerability of woody plant encroachment. The key components of risk are sensitivity and exposure. Sensitivity is the relative ease to which woody plants can establish and spread in grasslands. Exposure is driven by seed and subsequent recruitment of woody plants. Adaptive capacity is the ability to respond to risk and impact vulnerability. Some site-specific examples will better relate this information to local management. This photo depicts a high-risk situation. The lack of ground cover and the reduced vigor of the perennial grassland community creates a sensitive site where woody plants could easily germinate and establish. The mature woody plants in the background are exposing the site in the foreground to a plethora of seed. Adaptive capacity could include removing seedlings as they germinate and thus lower vulnerability, but that capacity must be significant over time. As the photo indicates, capacity is not negating risk, and thus vulnerability is high, based on the observation of continued recruitment of young woody plants on the landscape. This situation depicts a site that has lower risk due to competition by a healthy perennial grassland community. The landscape also receives fire in the form of prescribed burning, which also reduces sensitivity. Having reduced sensitivity makes this site less vulnerable. However, the significant seed exposure continues to keep risk and vulnerability higher than desired. It's these types of scenarios where removal of the seed exposure can develop large intact grassland cores quickly. By removing exposure, risk is reduced and thus vulnerability. It's these situations that the initiative can take large strides to combating woody plant encroachment. Identifying and spatially mapping the woody plant encroachment phases on your landscape is a critical first step. Identifying these phases will assist you in developing a spatial game plan to reducing risk and vulnerability of woody plant encroachment. The 5 phases are clearly identified within the graphic and include intact, that is treeless with no seed; dispersal, that is treeless but exposed to seed; recruitment, that has young seedlings; encroachment that has trees that are producing more seeds, and state transition that is dominated by woody plants. An example of this mapping is a sobering reality of just how past approaches missed risk and vulnerability. The aerial photo on the left appears fairly tree-free, except for the dense tree areas in the lower left corner on the adjacent property. As we inventory mature trees, the red triangles in the second photo, we begin to realize that tree-free isn't a fitting definition. As we put a buffer around those mature trees to better understand where seed dispersal is likely to be, we can quickly see that risk and vulnerability is much higher than we'd ever considered in past assessments. The final photo shows the various phases mapped across the land unit. Through some strategic action and removal, a significant area could be transitioned to intact with only seed from adjacent properties. As neighbors team up to further address these risks, larger and larger cores will develop. Once all the phases are identified and known, the rancher and neighbors develop a spatial game plan to address the various phases of woody plant encroachment on the landscape. Having a clear understanding of how practices impact sensitivity and exposure helps them select the right practice at the right location and at the right time. An integrated approach using various practices and techniques will lead to long-term success. The final piece of the GPGI framework is the agency support. NRCS provides both technical and financial assistance. Through technical assistance, NRCS planners are available to assist with translating the science at a local and site level. They can also assist with identifying and mapping the woody plant encroachment phases and assist with developing a conservation plan that reduces the risk and vulnerability on the landscape. Past approaches with singular focus on suppression and a lack of emphasis on risk and vulnerability need revised. It's going to take an integrated pest management approach that focuses on prevention, avoidance, monitoring, as well as suppression within land units and across landscapes. In order to develop a strategy for success, NRCS schedules a pest management conservation system practice. This practice will clearly identify the woody plant pest and the prevention, avoidance, monitoring, and suppression practices and techniques needed to halt woody plant encroachment and reduce risk and vulnerability at large scales. While brush management will continue to be a key suppression activity, this integrated and system-based approach will utilize various conservation practices and techniques that can directly lead to defending and growing grassland cores. With the integrated approach clearly outlined in a conservation plan, Kansas ranchers within Kansas GPGI core grassland areas may be eligible to receive financial assistance. Producers who formulate an integrated plan that will create intact grassland, who will implement a prescribed burn, and who will maintain adequate cover on their grassland landscape may be eligible to receive financial assistance to implement their integrated plan. Conservation practices that have direct impact on building grassland cores, as previously shown, may be eligible for financial assistance depending on the integrated plan developed and what practices or techniques have been and/or are needing to be implemented. Those eligible practices are shown on the screen. The success of the initiative will be evident through woody plant removal, the depletion of seed banks, and the growth of grassland cores. The Kansas NRCS is ready to technically and financially support ranchers as they defend and grow grassland cores via the Great Plains Grassland Initiative. If you envision your ranch being a valuable component of a larger landscape core, I'd like to encourage you to locate and contact your local NRCS field office at the link shown to begin your journey. Thank you.